And so today we celebrate really our last ordinarily scheduled Mass of this liturgical year as we prepare to pivot into Year B. And so you'll find is that the themes that we have been reflecting on in this weekday cycle in the week of the 34th week of Ordinary Time will be kind of sustained as well in the beginning of Advent. And so you'll see that as we start celebrating Sunday and the first week of Advent. And so we have been reading throughout this week from the prophet Daniel. And Daniel is certainly an important prophet, and it's easy to see how much of the language and the ideas that appear in his book are just lifted directly and used in Revelation, like it's the same ideas, same content to a great extent. And you got to remember that Daniel is written way before Christ, right? And so there are multiple levels in which the book can be fulfilled. And so we go back to this theme of theology of already and not yet. Of already and not yet. Already is the fulfillment that has happened already, right? There are things in Daniel that have already happened, and as we hear them today, belong to the very distant past. There are also things in Daniel that you could say have not been completed yet, according to the church's eschatological traditions. And so things that we heard today have already happened and are over. And there are things that we have heard today that aren't really completely fulfilled. Okay, so he talks about all this stuff in the vision with the beast and all that, and there's like an antichrist figure and these kind of things. And the Jewish people went through an incredibly challenging time when the Romans decided to destroy Jerusalem. I think it was around 80 AD that they destroyed the temple. And for the Jews, the destruction of the temple and the mass slaughter of the Jewish people in Jerusalem was the end of the world. It was the end of their world. It was an incredible scene of violence. And so that was something that they went through. Yet, many followers of Christ had taken things Christ had said about going to the mountains and getting away, that they took them literally. And many of the Christians as well, they had also been displaced unfortunately by persecution from some of the Jewish people. And so when Jerusalem was destroyed and when the temple fell, many of them survived, right? And so there's, again, multiple levels of fulfillment. What I would really encourage you to kind of think about and pray with is to look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, where it speaks of what we would call the end times teachings. There are a lot of people, especially many fundamentalist voices, many different kinds of Protestant voices, that have sought to make a lot of money through various prophecies and kind of projections about at the end times. And you will notice that much of that literature, I would even say almost 100% of it, is very similar. It's the same kind of people, and it's about the same message. It's very important that you not get too absorbed in things and revelations and such that are not approved by the Catholic Church, and in fact sometimes directly contradict public church teachings. Okay? And so we have to always discern the spirits, as St. Paul says, discern the spirits. It is an even worse, though, than going and believing things that aren't necessarily compatible with Catholic teaching, is to go around and tell people this is the truth. This is it. This is what it is. So make sure that you do not spread or share something that you don't know about. You don't know whether it's compatible with Catholic teaching, or that in fact it is, it may not be if it's a private revelation thing, it's not going to be mandatory. It's not something people have to believe, okay? So just keep that in mind, all right? And now we go to our gospel. And this is really where the message of, I think, the readings that we're hearing today, the liturgy, really kind of gets to the point. And Jesus says in Luke 21, "Beware that your hearts do not become drowsy from carousing and drunkenness and the anxieties of daily life." I have always loved that line, the anxieties of daily life. And, it's amazing how not only do we have to struggle with sin and temptation and all that, but even our noble and salutary pursuits can take us away from God. We could be so absorbed in the lives of our children, of your children. You could be so absorbed in politics. You could be so absorbed in anything that isn't God. You could be absorbed in end times literature and miss out on God and miss out on discipleship. And Jesus is speaking some very practical wisdom for daily life here, that we have to always remember the meta game, the big game. The big game of each of our lives is that we are, God willing, a disciple in a stage of one kind or another of our journey to God. God brought us into the world, and each of us are going to meet God one day. And the big problem in our lives is not, who's in power or who's doing this or that. Our big problem is, what is the condition of my discipleship? Let's not make assumptions about how good we are, about how holy we are, about how prepared we are. If you think you're at a good place spiritually, what are you doing for other people? Are you sacrificing for them? Are you building them up? How often have you talked about vocations in your family? Does your family know that you think the church needs more priests and religious? Things like that. Keep going back into that. And so by doing that, by being sincere, by not making assumptions about our spiritual place, our spiritual health, that God will be able to work in our lives, that we will have that strength we need to be disciples, to be prepared for challenges. Because what God wants each of us to be is to be an intentional disciple, a person that places God first and foremost. And to do that, we have to not be distracted constantly and led away by the anxieties of daily life.